Just amazing. I want to bring on my next guest, though. She is here, and I am super interested in this conversation. I don't get the opportunity to talk to her often, so I'm always happy when she joins me. Coleen Rowley. She is a lawyer, retired FBI agent, former MPLS legal counsel who wrote the memo about the FBI's pre-9/11 failures and testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee. She was also Democratic Farmer Labor Party candidate for Congress in Minnesota. Coleen, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Yeah. Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day indeed. As I told the audience, shout out to all the veterans and all those people who gave their lives so the country was willing to. It wagged a finger at the government, and I can't say wagged a finger strongly enough for the government misusing those lives. I think the responsibility should go both ways. If the person is willing, and I say this as having family. My cousin was in the military. My wife's or ex-wife's brother was in the military. Hell, he was in the military while we were married. So, it's like these people dedicate their lives to the country, and we should have a country that uses them responsibly. I don't think that's the way we do it. No, please respond to that.
Yeah, most recently, I would recommend this interview led by Veterans for Peace and some other peace groups done outside the United Nations in New York, where they are leading a fast against genocide. I'm part of it too here in Minnesota. Our local chapter of Veterans for Peace has, we started, this is day 5, and we've been fasting on 250 calories a day, which is not much. I can tell you, I looked up some calories, a banana and an apple, maybe. But this is day 5. I've lost over 5 pounds already by this fasting. But the Veterans for Peace in this video that they announced that this initiative had some really good, what you just talked about. Veterans who have been on the inside, who have seen the Smedley Butler war racket, and now realize that the United States is complicit in the genocide, Israel's genocide of Palestinians, that, we can hardly watch. So anyway, I'm part of that fast against genocide, which I think is really appropriate to mention on Memorial Day. We want to remember the sacrifices. And unfortunately, the irony is that, we're fasting here in a land where many of us are overweight. We have problems. 40% of people have type 2 diabetes. I mean, it's like unbelievable. And the poor little children that are turning into skeletons and babies, they say thousands of babies are dying. Israel is using food as a weapon now. They're taunting them. Oh, here's some food. Come get it. Almost the same way, Gabor Mate mentioned this, almost the same way as the Nazis lured the Jews onto the trains that went to concentration camps by giving them a couple loaves of bread. And that's what Israel is doing now in Gaza. It's just sickening and horrible, but we're doing that. And the other thing, I know you wanted to talk about the FBI, but I will just mention one other project that I'm leading. But we have a couple hundred at least, signers of Taxpayers Against Genocide class action. This was started in California, and then of course, there's 100 and some districts in the United States. So each district is different. And it turns out in Minnesota that all of our congresspersons, with the exception of one, Ilhan Omar, and both of our senators, Klobuchar and Tina Smith, all voted to give $26 billion to arm Israel's genocide last year. So we started a class action and we filed it on May 12th. So it's officially filed class action in Minnesota, District of Minnesota. And now today, or tomorrow, actually, I've got to call the clerk of court and find out how we officially serve all of our congresspersons and senators. again, with the exception of Ilhan Omar.
That is fascinating. Oh, that is fascinating. And you're absolutely right. It is hard to, there's food everywhere in America. And oftentimes it's, McDonald's, Burger King, it's done for profit. So they have these huge sizes. You may get 250 calories in a soda, maybe, at like 12 ounces, if that. And so I'm trying to put it in context for people to realize how little the 250 calorie thing is, what that sacrifice is that you're trying to do in order to bring attention to what we've been doing.
You can't eat a McDonald's and have it. That's going to be way over 250 calories. You've got to eat pretty much fruits and vegetables, like lettuce. The first 3-4 days, I ate a lot of lettuce. Lettuce has almost no calories. Of course, it doesn't do much for your body either, other than the nutrients. I found out because I exercise and I train for triathlons. I found out that I couldn't even bike on the exercise bike yesterday. Wow. I was a whole mile per hour slower. I just couldn't do it. My heart rate went up. I can, on an exercise bike, you can monitor your heart rate, and my pulse went up too high. But that's because lettuce doesn't do it for you. Lettuce has no energy. And the bad thing is, people in the United States, we eat way too much carbs and sugar, right. Starch and sugar. Which I will say it does give you energy to exercise and everything, but we eat too much of it. And that's really the culprit for type 2 diabetes. People generally do need to eat more fruits and vegetables, a lot more, and a lot less carbs and sugar. We're doing the fast for 40 days. And when I committed to it, you had to sign up nationally. When I committed to it, I said, I don't know if I can do it 40 days. You have to be pretty overweight to do this kind of a thing for 40 days. If I was a little overweight, but I said, maybe I don't know if I can do it. I will do it as long as I can. And I'll tell you what, it's 5 days now of 250 calories a day is pretty darn difficult.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've been in a hospital where they wouldn't allow me to eat, or you could only have like broth. You're climbing up the walls. Like it's get weak, your body. My point is, it's a sacrifice, and you guys are making that sacrifice for damn good reasons. For one, since we were talking about this, you have Israel continue to make the excuse, well, the reason we're starving the Palestinians is because, Hamas keeps stealing their food, which is pretty outrageous, right? So you get this article to come out right here. World Food Program, we have not seen any evidence that Hamas is stealing humanitarian aid. Mm-hmm. The UN Organization Executive Director, Cindy McCain, told U.S. broadcaster CBS. And of course, it gets worse to the bombings that were taking place where they were burning children alive. And some of these bombings, I think I showed this video earlier today, where they effectively bombed a school. And as they were bombing the school, you can actually see a little girl inside trying to find a way out. You have Home Security Secretary Noam praying at the wall, meaning these two things are happening nearly simultaneously. Isn't that amazing? Just astonishing. America first, by the way. America first. And it gets even worse. Donald Trump is pretending, or let's say the media is pretending, that there's a split between Trump and Israel, while simultaneously Trump initiates this plan where they're using like these kind of commercial food representatives mixed with the military in order to use food as a weapon to force the Palestinians into a concentration camp. As you pointed out, so very similar to the Nazis using food in order to compel them to bus people to concentration camps. This stuff is disgusting. The guy who was supposed to be running that program, not a dove, by the way, resigned in protest saying, what you guys are doing is never going to work, especially under any kind of humanitarian grounds, because you're effectively, A, trying to make a profit off of it, and B, using people's needs in order to push their behavior into these kind of pins, or for that matter, to try to ethnically cleanse them out the country. It's disgusting. I agree with you. I agree with you. I didn't bring you off of that. I do appreciate what you're doing, though. I guess that's my point. It is very disgusting. To move over to Ken Klippenstein. I don't know if the audience knows this, but Ken published the dossier of the guy who killed those two people at the Israeli embassy. Rodriguez, I think his name is. After Ken published the manifesto, Ken gets a visit from the FBI. Now, this is the second time in less than a year that Ken has gotten a visit from the FBI. And this is the article that Ken pointed this out. I'm fascinated by this because there's supposed to be a First Amendment in this country. And the idea that these guys are coming there seemingly trying to get him to incriminate himself in a crime, no less, is pretty astonishing. And he says, FBI visits me over manifesto. Here's 11 questions they asked. Now, Ken is publishing the 11 questions, even though the FBI told him not to talk about this to anybody. So it's like they're like, don't tell anybody this. And he immediately publishes the questions. But he points out that he put out the article, the manifesto of the killer, Rodriguez. He gets a visit from the FBI out of the blue. And they are asking him incriminating questions like, hey, when did you know about this? Did you have anything to do with the killer? Oh, that's an interesting one, right? Did you have anything to do with the killer? Did you know that he was going to do this before he did this attack? Meaning these questions seemingly are trying to incriminate him in a crime that he had nothing to do with. He's just a journalist publishing the article. Give me your take on this. Is this normal for the FBI to do to journalists?
I will say one part of it is normal, that and you saw this after 9/11. After 9/11, and I was even on an interview, one of our local public television shows with our U.S. attorney. I was still the legal counsel in Minneapolis, and we got a lot of criticism because the FBI started knocking on doors. So they called this, there was a term for it, but it means knocking on doors. So normally, you know what? The FBI agents are paid a lot of money. They don't need to spend their time going out and knocking on people's doors saying, hey, what do you know? What do you know about terrorism in a general blanket way? This would be ridiculously ineffective. Right. But after 9/11, there were groups of agents that were sent out. Of course, it was somewhat targeted to people that they thought, Muslims, imams, whatever. And it has a dual purpose. It was not only to say, oh, what do you know about Al Qaeda and terrorism? Do you know anyone in Afghanistan or in Iraq? So those types of questions. But also they were those door knocks were trying to develop informants. And so by pretending, I shouldn't say pretending, by and large, the FBI agents I worked with were nice. We were nice. And so they tried to be nice. And that way they hope that maybe through bribing somebody with money or whatever, that they will then become an informant. So there was a dual purpose for these door knocks. Now, the FBI overall got criticized, even by the mainstream media. What are you doing? You're harassing people. And I and the U.S. attorney went on our public television show just here was my point. And I said, it's legal, because a lot of the press was saying this is illegal to go up to the doors and knock without any reasonable suspicion or without probable cause. You can't go up to someone's door and say, hey, I want to talk to you. And I was the legal counsel. I said, no, that's as long as you stay, you don't, sneak over and peek through a window, but as long as you stay on the doorstep and you knock, ring the doorbell, perfectly legal. And then the people have a choice. They don't have to talk with you. If they want to shut the door, they can. Whatever. So that was my point. And I don't remember what the U.S. attorney, but we were trying to defend this practice that we started after 9/11. Now, in history, I will say one more thing. I should have probably mentioned that this type of overall overreaching, again, door knock. This goes back to Vietnam, where it's not a good idea to do this. So even if it's legal, to go knocking on doors and kind of harassing people is not especially good idea for law enforcement. During Vietnam, and I joined really close, a few years after Vietnam War ended. And when we went through Quantico, we were told that a lot of people would not open their doors. And so, for instance, we had to do background investigations, just perfectly banal, like your neighbor is being appointed a judge. And so now the FBI has to talk to all the neighbors. That's a good example. But anytime you're up for a federal appointment, you have to go knock on the doors and ask the neighbors, does he drink? Does he have whole parties? That type of thing. And you know what? In 1981, when I was doing this, a lot of people would not open their doors. So you would knock and say, FBI, just want to ask a few questions or whatever, and people would not open the doors. And this is a throwback to what happened during Vietnam when the FBI was all out, mostly looking for draft dodgers. So they were going up in this blanket way, trying to find people who had skipped out on the military or whatever, AWOL and draft dodgers, etc. So, there was a backlash. What I'm saying is there was a backlash from Vietnam that even when I joined the FBI, it showed you that, this kind of harassing thing and going out and knocking on doors is not a good idea. Okay, so that has happened in the past. Somewhat normal if you go by what happened after 9/11. It was normalized again, I should say. Okay, now what's different about what's going on now? And you alluded to it in your question, is now doing this with journalists. That's the new wrinkle on it. If we had done this with journalists, even right after 9/11, again, we got into trouble. The FBI, the FBI at the time. By the way, I've been retired since 2004. And so sometimes I automatically say we, but obviously I'm retired for 20 years now. And so I shouldn't be saying we anymore. But the FBI got into trouble even when they weren't targeting journalists after 9/11. And now all of this has been so normalized that Ken Klippenstein, and others, he's not the only one, Max Blumenthal, there have been a lot of journalists, and that they claim that journalists who do not agree with U.S. perpetual war policy and now the Israeli genocide. If you are against Israeli genocide, they're trying to make you into a complicit with terrorism or even a terrorist. They've even called people, there's a law. They're trying to pass a law in Congress that they would go after nonprofits if they protest against Israeli genocide and say that, oh, well, you're part of the terrorism. I mean, this is so ludicrous. And yet, with how they manipulate people, based on American pride. And of course, here we are, Memorial Day, and, military pride and all this. It works to a great extent on a lot of people. And there are a lot of Americans who now think that if you are against killing of babies, I mean, that picture of the little 3-year-old, I'm sure she's trying to find her way out of the flames and probably died. I mean, I can't I have five grandchildren. I had my granddaughter here yesterday, 2 years old. I cannot even begin to imagine how bad this is and how horrible. And yet, for me saying that it's horrible for Israelis to be murdering children like this, they are going to say that you are complicit with terrorism. Because the Israelis and AIPAC and all of the lobby so controls our Congress. By the way, that's why we're suing. We have a class action against our congresspersons because 7 out of 8 of them all voted to give more bombs and arms to Israel when they're killing children like this. And yeah, the propaganda. Okay, there's maybe one good side to this, and then I'll shut up. The one good side is this is so ludicrous and so bad that I just can't imagine that more Americans are not seeing how bad this is. And good for Klippenstein trying to expose that, you know what, we have a First Amendment, freedom of press, and, you know, it is legal to knock on the door, absolutely legal. You can ask you can even ask a journalist. Now, we're supposed to be careful, but by the way, with the freedom of press, there were always regulations, not actual statutes, but there were policy and regulations that were supposed to limit the kind of harassment that the FBI could do on journalists. And that was, and even it went as far as saying you were not supposed to serve a subpoena on a journalist. There was it was in the Code of Federal Regulations. You were supposed to first voluntarily ask, and then I think you needed a court order or something. I mean, it was basically limiting what you could ask of a journalist, and that was by policy and regulations. And I'm sorry to say, I think in the 20 years that I've been retired, I think a lot of this has been ignored or, kind of, evaporated, which is very obvious now with what they did to Ken Klippenstein. I mean, if you can knock on a door and say, you didn't have any prior knowledge of this or something, fine. And if he wants to answer or not, it is legal. But it is not a good practice for the FBI to do this in a widespread way because it's going to backfire on the cooperation that the public would normally want to give to police efforts. If their neighbor is a drug dealer, if their neighbor is a serial killer, you want to have the public help you, or a kidnapper. Guess what? That's why I joined the FBI. I joined the FBI because I didn't want to see children being kidnapped and murdered. I didn't want to see serial killers. I didn't want to see drugs being sold to kids or whatever. That's why I joined. And you know what? It kind of makes you mad then when the neighbor says, I don't like that guy, but I'm not going to cooperate with the FBI. You're the bad FBI. And I think this is what the FBI should worry about. They should worry about the backlash.
I think the issue is this is intimidation. I mean, it's if you are going to a random neighbor because you have, let's say, a drug issue in your community, and you are talking, like, for example, there used to be a house maybe a block or so away from where my grandmother used to live. And everybody understood there's squatters in that house that are selling drugs. Everybody knew there was something dodgy about that house. Okay, so it's one thing if you go to a neighbor and say, hey, what's going on with this house? And they said, look, man, they're doing deals out here at 2 a.m, et cetera. I get that, right? That makes sense. Or somebody calls the FBI and say, hey, I think a kid is being kept against their will at this other place. Again, I get that. Wellness checks. I get wellness checks, right? I haven't heard from this person in 3 days. I'm knocking on the door to make sure the person is okay.
Exactly.
Ken Klippenstein writes an article and you knock on his door, again, for the second time in less than a year. You know he's a journalist. You know what he does. And your questions seemingly are there to get him to implicate himself in a crime. Like I used to binge watch police interrogations. Oh, I love them. They're the most fascinating things in the world to me. It makes you realize, don't talk to the cops. If you've done anything, I don't care what it is, don't talk to the cops. Those things are scripted and organized in a way to get you to confess. Everything that's happening there is almost theatrical in the way that it's set up in order to get you to confess to something. And oftentimes, an American citizen not knowing their rights and maybe not even knowing what is a crime may volunteer information or wrap themselves into a logic trap where they have to confess to something. There's no way out of that box. The best thing you can do in that box is draw. You can't win. Even if the cop thinks you're innocent, the cop can't go to the court and say, well, I think the guy's innocent. Because that's not really, he tells you everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. It doesn't say anything can help you. Everything can be used against you. When you're talking to Ken and you're asking him these questions, for example, like they were asking him stuff like, where had I gotten the manifesto? Had I had pre-knowledge of the attack? Did I receive instructions about how to release the statement? Okay, let's say he said yes to the last one. Could he be implicated in a crime? Like, that's what I mean. Like, these questions are set up and they keep telling him, you're not in trouble. You're not in trouble. Okay, well, cops can lie to people. And so the very fact that saying you're not in trouble, but asking him something that can directly incriminate him in a crime is pretty outrageous. I just find this to be intimidation. And finally, he produces the questions. There were 11 questions. When did he encounter the manifesto? How did he first encounter the manifesto? Did he receive instructions from the source of the manifesto on how to disseminate it? Okay, so all three of those questions get implicated in a crime. Does the system or platform for which he received the manifesto, is it capable of metadocs concerning the transfer of the manifesto? Okay, that one is getting directly to sources, which is, again, supposed to be protected. So they want him to, on some level, if he says yes, to then divulge the source of where he got the information from. Did he make any edits to the manifesto? Okay, that's fair enough. Was this the first and only interaction with who submitted the manifesto? Okay. So did you have any relationship to the person who ostensibly wrote the manifesto, ideally the killer? Did the receipt of the manifesto predate the attack? Did you get this before he killed these people? Where else, if any, did he disseminate the manifesto? Does he have any knowledge of where the manifesto was published or shared? And why does he think he was the one who received the manifesto? Why do you think he gave it to you, buddy? Now, I don't know if Kit answered these questions. He told him to go talk to his lawyer. He just said, talk to my lawyer. I don't want anything to do with this, talk to my lawyer. It is his job as a journalist to do this, from my point of view. And by the way, the cops released manifestos too. If you remember, the trans person who went in and killed all of those people, the cops were supposed to release the manifesto of that person. Personally, I think the Bin Laden manifesto should have been released. You should know why somebody did something. Maybe they have a point, even if what they did was atrocious. And in this case, Ken does his job as a journalist, lets it go, and he gets a visit from the cops. You tell me, are these questions trying to implicate him in a crime? That's the way I took it. I didn't take it anywhere else. Either we want your sources, or were you somehow responsible, like associated with the person as they did this?
Yes, I totally agree. Many, if not most of those questions could, if he had answered them, could have implicated him. And I will just mention one more little legal tidbit. They do, police or FBI do not have to give Miranda rights unless you're in custody. So if they question you when you are in custody, now when they do a door knock, you're in your own house. And so, they will never give Miranda rights to somebody
without ever getting Miranda. That's your point.
Yeah. Yep. No, when they do a door knock, they will never give Miranda rights. And so many groups now, again, this is part of the backlash, are saying either don't open the door. Now, problem is if they do have a search warrant or something, they can bust your door down. It can be dangerous. They can even do flashbang. So it's very difficult to know what to advise people. If they say FBI, we have a search warrant or we have an arrest warrant, and they're supposed to knock. They are supposed to knock and wait. They're not supposed to rush in, because those types of situations are dangerous. If people they don't know who's breaking into their house. And there's been all kinds. The reason they created a law, this is a statute, knock and announce is a legal requirement. And so they're supposed to knock, they're supposed to announce their identity and their authority and their purpose. And if they just knock and say, FBI, we have some questions for you. No, you would be free at that point not to even answer the door. Yeah. And again, I'm going back to the backlash, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of legitimate reasons for the FBI to knock on your door, or any law enforcement, police or any law enforcement, to knock on a door. This is not good for law enforcement. It's a dumb thing for them to be doing this in a general overreaching way, because it's going to hurt their own efforts, their own investigative and public safety efforts. It's a bad thing. And in this case, why did the FBI say don't publish the questions that we're asking you? Okay, right. I can guess they don't want people to be forewarned. There are thank goodness, there are some other journalists who are, I would say, like Klippenstein, but they were like Julian Assange, the Gray Zone, Mate. There are some other good journalists who have the bravery. Chris Hedges, I just watched this long discussion. He gave a public talk. Chris Hedges, he's been through it. He's been around the block on all of this intimidation. And, he got fired from the New York Times for being against the Iraq War. He was not allowed to say the Iraq War was a lie. I mean, incredible. So that type of effort now to go against journalists, that the FBI does not want any other journalists that are in their crosshairs, like Chris Hedges even. They don't want them to know ahead of time that, you're right, many of these questions are designed to implicate them so that they could be charged. For instance, one good example is the espionage, the old 1917 Espionage Act. Because that law, you can use that for whistleblowers. They tried. James Risen at the time was a Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times journalist. He published the fact that the United States was illegally mass surveilling American citizens, and they were intent on finding out who his source was. He had more than one source anyway. But he wrote a book, and it was on mass surveillance, and also it was something about, I think, Iran, where they tried to do this kind of a false flag thing on Iran, where they leaked them false nuclear plans. There was something like that as well. Well, of course, he had sources. Risen just didn't guess these things. He had some whistleblower sources, and they went after Risen. So Klippenstein, he's in good company in some ways, because there have been journalists. Again, if you try to be I.F. Stone, if you try to be I.F. Stone these days, they're going to put you in their list. They have a list of journalists they want to try to target. And going back to, I wanted to say one thing about Manifesto. Here's the kicker, the irony was the only way that the FBI was finally able to catch the Unabomber. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, was sending mail bombs for 18 years. And
really?
the FBI, 18 years. And he killed, I think, 6 or 7 people. Some of them were just secretaries, and they opened up the mail bomb. He was against technology, and his method, okay, fine to be against technology, but his method of going after technology was to send mail bombs to the heads of tech companies, whatever. He did this for 18 years. He lived in a little cabin in Montana. No one knew him. He was a little bit extremist. I mean, he was a lot extremist in that one area of sending mail bombs. But he didn't even really have his family barely was in touch with him. The bottom line is they never would have caught him. The FBI never would have caught they were offering $1 million reward, and they had a couple of sketches, and that was it. They never would have caught the Unabomber terrorists had they were asked to publish the manifesto, at least for a couple of years. The FBI, we don't want to publish a terrorist manifesto. Finally, some person who knows psychology in the we had psychologists in the FBI. So someone said, publish it. And the first time that was published, his brother, the only person in the United States who could have realized that his own brother was sending the mail bombs through the thing. And he called the FBI. And so that's a dramatic illustration of why journalism and getting the truth out is important. It's a dramatic, and again, people get locked into these stupid groupie think. I call it groupie think, but it's basically manipulation. The FBI gets these agents who go out, they think it's a good idea to ask those questions, whatever. No, it's got a lot of problems. And I just hope there's more Coleen Rowleys that have brains and that think about this, when they're asked to do something that's like more whistleblowers, essentially. Because when you're asked to do something that's wrong or illegal, that you really have to say no.
Coleen, you are fantastic. And I hope that there are more Coleens still in the FBI also. They need them. They need them. Lord knows they do. Coleen Rowley, she is a lawyer, retired FBI agent, former MPLS legal counsel who wrote a memo for the FBI's pre-9/11 failures and testified at the Senate Judiciary Committee. She is also a Democratic former Labor Party candidate for Congress in Minnesota. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. I know it's early. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You have a good one. Be